Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? We are towards the end of May. I think we're heading into Memorial Day weekend coming up soon if you're in the U.S. If you're in the U.S., we had Mother's Day. That can be a hard one for many people. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Anyways, how are you doing? We are almost halfway into 2024. How's your year going? This episode with Jen is just to continue yay, more healing around attachment wounds for me. I hope I'm getting my lessons that I need to learn because I'm ready for a little break. I am on day 2 of feeling regulated, but Jen and I talk a little bit more about some of the things that have been going on between us. The work we do together is amazing. I'm so incredibly blessed and grateful to have Jen in my life and for the work that we do. I don't think a lot of people can do the depth work that we do together. But I had another blip with a friendship, and using that principle, the framework that Jen and I have of conflict can invite more intimacy, that is not what happened. And I had a couple of things stacked on top of each other that happened in the last week that made it really painful and really difficult for me. And I navigated through it. So Jen and I talk about this blip that happened, and really my focus is less on the other person and what happened and more on what went on for me and how did I process through it and how am I working with my parts and my attachment injuries and how am I focusing my energy on me. I think I say this in the episode, but part of what I've had to be really mindful about is when I'm going through a lot of these attachment injuries and I'm not feeling very solid and I'm wanting somebody to help co-regulate me, but I'm so dysregulated that if they're not able to co-regulate in the way that's helpful, it ends up being even more harmful to me because I just don't have the reserves to kind of take care of myself. And that's due to all my trauma, that had I not had the trauma, I would innately have the inner resources to care for myself when I'm struggling. I'm not talking about having to do things alone, about being hyper independent, but I'm talking about if you do not have trauma and you have a secure attachment, when things are difficult, you have those internal voices that reassure you and you're not worried about people leaving or getting angry or you leaving and getting angry, that you've had this experience that conflict is normal, you can work through it, it's not a big thing. But when you don't have that foundation of secure attachment, it really can create a lot of dysregulation and fear and anger. And if you have a little OCD like I do, and your attachment injuries bring up more ruminating about things and kind of cycling through things. It was a hard couple days, y'all. And there's some really very, very powerful things that came out of it. Would I choose to work through that? No. But do I think that it's going to really help me moving forward? And is it helping me now? Absolutely. And at the end, Jen and I talk about self-care and some areas where I think it can be hard for us to take care of ourselves. I think it's a great episode. I love this vulnerable work that Jen and I are doing. I don't see a lot of places where people can get this. So if you are someone who thinks it's helpful and you can share the podcast with others, if you are in therapy or coaching and you think that your coach or your therapist would benefit from sharing this with their clients, if you're a therapist and you think your clients may benefit from seeing what it can look like as people work through things. I know that the way that Jen and I work through things is not how other people do, but I don't see this broken down very much. And I feel like I'm hoping that it's a gift and an honor. I don't know if that's the right word. My hope is that it feels like something that you don't get to see very much and that it's helpful. I think that's it. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hey, Patricia. Oh, that's a tricky question. I'm okay. I have a lot going on. I have a lot of balls in the air. I have some emotional stuff that seems to be landing in my stomach, and I'm hoping it won't be too distracting while we record today.
And if it is, we'll manage.
If it's drawing my focus away, because sometimes that happens.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Yeah. Thanks for understanding.
Oh, of course.
How are you, my dear?
I'm actually doing really well, and I'm relieved. I had probably 4 of the hardest days emotionally that I can remember having. It was just really, really, really hard. And what happened is things kept getting stacked on top of each other. So it wasn't just one thing. It's primarily, I think it's fair to say that the theme is attachment injury. So we're just going to keep talking about these until we don't need to talk about them anymore. And I had a little bit, from my perspective, a little hiccup with you. I was okay with it, but you were going away for a few days and then coming back on your birthday. And so I was really clear that I did not want to impact that. And so the little hiccup that I was feeling with you, which as it turns out is my stuff and had nothing to do with you, I was holding on to that, and then you were gone, so I couldn't reach out to you. And then I had something happen that I want to talk about here that in the moment for a few days was huge. And then a third thing happened that I don't know if it's big or not, but that was just the last thing that happened, and it really pushed me over the edge. And I really thought that Saturday and Sunday, I told my husband after this third thing happened, I said, that's it. I'm shutting down. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to my room, and I don't know when I'm coming out. I'm not mad at you, but I don't have any more capacity. And I was really surprised that on Saturday, a friend offered to come over and help me with something. And then I paddled on Sunday. And then this thing that, happened, there was some shifts in it. Monday, I did have a little thing that happened that got me irritable. And so it's like, I'm sharing this with you because of this state of dysregulation in my body has been so high. And yesterday, Tuesday, and today, Wednesday, so far, knock on wood, I have not had any dysregulation. And so I'm just finally having this sense of oh, life is good. Life is nice. I'm enjoying this. But this was incredibly intense. And with the amount of physical dysregulation that I felt and how much emotional work I had to do to navigate through this, oof, it was a lot.
Yeah, I hear that. Gosh, if only we could keep the memo that it's not going to last forever, and that if you give it some time, I know I lose sight of that when I'm in the thick of it. Although I think that's getting better. I'm sorry you were in it like that. And at the same time as I say, I'm sorry, it's I know, and I know that you know that this is stuff that's coming up for healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's so you know yourself better. So when whoever it is you choose to share it with, me or anybody else, gets to know you better and your tropes better. I think it was interesting because I think we had a however many miles apart, but simultaneous Saturday where I think we both had moments of, and I always wonder, it's if I were a screenwriter or a filmmaker or something, we could flash timing wise, we should probably figure out was that at the same time that I was having an urge to reach out and call you, and I was getting really kicked up with some attachment wounds as well. And some of the work that we've done together is to do the parts work in the moment, right? Put our hands on our hearts, realize it's not what's current, that this goes down deep into some wounding that we need to show up for, especially, even more importantly, and then bring it to maybe share with the catalyst, whoever is, that oh so sacred role of bringing up our bleepity bleep.
Yeah.
And when we have a willing friend, partner, a therapist, or a coach could play this role to be able to look at it gently, with compassion, with curiosity. And long, you have to leave perfectionism long in the dust, right? Because this is so human and we all have this, and it does not mean that you're somehow not a good enough human or whatever that might be. You can't not human. You're a human.
Yeah.
We don't go up to horses and say, you're not horsey enough.
Right.
We just do what we do. And this is something that to some degree or another, I think all of us have. Some of our wounding is it has different details and different depths, occurs at different ages, has a different trope. But that's intimacy, right? Share that.
Yes. When you're with somebody that has the curiosity and the ability and has done enough of their own work to see it, I think the challenge is when you don't know that you are engaging with someone that hasn't done their work, is not aware of where they're at, and doesn't have the capacity to see for me, I often have the perspective of like, this is what I'm going through. This is what you might be going through, and be able to hold those perspectives.
Mm-hmm. I'm not in competition.
Yeah.
Right? They're just, yeah. You're so good at that.
Thank you. So are you. But when we have people that we don't know until we bump up against something that they have limitations, but they don't recognize what their limitations are, and they feel like you're the problem,
Mm-hmm.
that's a challenge. And how do you
Mm-hmm.
navigate that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, I've had those words directly. Ooh, I have a problem, and it being received by someone that's like, why are you making this a problem?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like a lot of bewilderment. I also think that one of the important things that you and I have is sort of like a shared paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a shared worldview or understanding or lens through which we're kind of looking at these things. It's kind of like when you're going to have a conversation about anything important, we should always take that minute to like define our terms.
Right.
Right.
But I think often I'm struggling. I really want to talk about what happened, because I think that the process for me was incredibly powerful. And I'm so pleased with how I showed up and how I handled it. My concern is that I don't want to do anything to potentially ruin a relationship by sharing information. And I'm not sure how to share about what happened without, I love giving you specifics, and I don't want to cause challenges in another relationship. What I do want to do is jump to kind of what the end part is, and then we'll figure out how and if I can go back in and talk about this.
And this one isn't with me.
This is not with you.
Because I was going to say, with me, we have a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah. Yeah. With you, I feel like I am really good about owning my stuff. I still am projecting and doing a lot of reenactment. And that's what the little hiccup that I had from my side with you is. I still have young parts that I didn't realize are young parts that are still wanting you to show up in a way that like that time is over. And so what sort of the bottom line is, and what I've been working on, and yesterday I was really angry about this. You and I talked about this. I wasn't angry with you. But when I was young, I needed a secure attachment. We all need that. Someone who is there for us, good enough, not perfect, but good enough. And we get the sense that we are loved, we are cared for, we have behavior that may not be desirable, but love is not conditional, that our caregivers are there consistently, that we can count on them, that we're not going to be abandoned, rejected, abused, neglected, ignored, that we have that steady attachment figure so that we grow up into adults that have that. And the reenactment that I've been doing with you, and I didn't think I was doing it, but I have been, is looking to you to fill that need, that time is over. Like there is nobody in this world that can meet that need that I needed as a child. That cannot and will not happen from that child to caregiver place. That time is over. And it's my job to work with my parts, which I have been doing a great job, and it's a lot of work, to really show up and be there for myself. Does this mean that I can't depend on people, that other people can't give me comfort and be there for me? No. But part of what was happening for me, and I feel vulnerable sharing this, but I'm just going to share it. And I shared with you this morning. So I'll tell you what would happen before and what I'm doing differently now is I send you a polo. I have an expectation that you're going to respond and reflect in a way that young part feels like you're my nurturing caregiver who's telling me that I'm okay, and you're telling me what a great job I did. And even when you do that, I still end up having this longing during the day that like, it's not enough. I want more, because you can't give me what I'm wanting, but I kept thinking that you could. And now what I'm doing is really checking in with my parts before I leave you a polo and asking myself, do I have an expectation? If you don't respond to anything that I'm saying, are you okay with me sharing this? Okay.
Yes.
I know we've talked about this, but
Thank you for asking.
I just want consent.
Well, I mean, we do that. That's part of our pattern too. It's like we get in and like, wait a minute, is this okay?
Yeah. Yeah. So being really clear that if I have an expectation, I'm aware of that, I'm making that clear to you. But if I'm just sharing, is this just because I'm sharing? And if you don't respond to any of it, am I going to be okay with it? And then because often in the morning, because of the time difference, I'll wake up and there will or won't be a polo from you. So before I even open my eyes, I check in with my parts. How am I doing? What am I needing? And if I'm hoping that there's a polo from you, what is it that I'm hoping that you're going to, I'm going to get from you? And then redoing that work for myself. So that might look like you're doing such a great job. I'm so proud of this hard work that you've been doing. I'm so glad you went on that paddle last night. That was such great self-care. Whatever I'm hoping to get from you. And then once I'm kind of grounded in that, I check my phone. This morning, there wasn't a polo from you. And so, I had to check in. Am I having feelings about this? And from the time I woke up until you and I connected, it had been a few hours. My adult part is like, you have clients, you have a busy day, everything's fine. And I've been able to do that throughout our relationship. What I noticed this morning is that there's a very, very young part. And it's like, you forgot me. I'm not important. You're probably spending time with somebody else which is a pattern from my childhood, that I would be replaced by somebody else. So somebody else is taking the time and attention that my inner child feels like that should, she should be your priority, which is not.
Right.
But I don't think that I had really recognized how young this part is and feeling. And so I kind of checked into the age, and everything to me always feels like 6 or 7. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like the world is not safe. I'm chronically lonely and desperate for that connection to make me feel like I'm not floating around in the world. And so that was really good information. So I go inside and work with my parts, and I have an adult part, a father part that is really loving and reassuring, and kind of talk to that child and responded to that child the way that I would if it were a real child. And then when I heard from you, I don't even know how to verbalize it, because I feel like I have this adult part, I've got this young part, but I don't feel like I'm acting any of it out with you. And then I think you left me a polo. And before I listened to the polo, I had to ask myself, am I having an expectation? Am I expecting you to respond to certain things? And if I am, I need to check in, because this is what happened last week, that I had an expectation that you would reflect certain things and you didn't. We didn't talk about this, so I'm feeling like
it's okay.
Okay.
I mean, this has happened.
This is not new information.
This is not new. I mean, I do this, and the little parallel with me is like the feeling bad about that, the wanting to be and show up as a good friend for you, and like the overperforming, which we've talked about. And right. For me to show up a little more naturally, it's nice to articulate it. And I think I often do now. Like, oh gosh, I know I'm sort of blowing it on the reflecting. Yeah. I know, and I'm sorry. Tell me if I if I've not hit on something important. Often I'll say, I'm going to go back and re-listen to your polo so I can get it. Right. And you will often at that point be like, not to, because articulate, it's not like the thing we think it is, right? It's like just the connection, the shared experience, and that's sort of being able to talk about it.
Yeah. So I did this check-in to make sure that I was okay. And I feel like I've been able to be very present with you. But part of my reenactment with you is changing the bar all the time and the overperforming. And so I have this expectation that for me, so this goes back to when we first met about time. If you love me, you will show up on time. And we've worked through that. So then the next way that was a reenactment of, if you love me, you will reflect what I say. And this may or may not be true in the present moment, or it may be more related to my history. But I've shared that with you before. And last night when I left you a polo, what I said was, and what I really want to try is, I just want you to show up when you want to show up, how you want to show up, without any of the, I need you to be this. I want you to do, if you only did this, now I want you to do this. Stand on your left foot, stand on your right foot. These are reenactments that we do because we think that's what we need to feel loved. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes I feel really loved in the moment, and then I'm still left with that chronic loneliness because it's not about you. And I'm really working on not having any expectations about when we talk, if you reflect, how you show up, and really being mindful about what is going on for me. If I have a need or a want, I will definitely tell you. And
yes,
we had talked about when you came back, and we touched base briefly on Sunday, and you were celebrating your birthday. You asked how I was. It's like, it has been hard. There's a lot going on. We decided to talk the next day. And when we did talk, I said, I want to hear about you, but I also really need some time. So it's not about me not having needs and not taking up space, but it's also about knowing that my things can wait and I don't have this urgency that I have had in the past, and about me really learning to show up for me. And I will tell you that in that is a huge amount of anger and rage because like, I just want the binky and I want to feel good.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I want that for you too.
Yeah.
For all of us, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I really appreciate how you're articulating this. And I appreciate, that both things can be true, right? Like you want to be able to be there for yourself, and that's worthwhile. And again, I do like to stress that there's really no end point to this. There's growth and evolution, and it's that willingness to be in relationship with that part of you and that part of your history.
Yeah.
And the richer that becomes, it's not to say that something might not really spike it from time to time, but I know with my own parts, it has gotten easier. And by easier, like something useful that I like to track it with is what's the frequency, what's the intensity, what's the duration, and how well is that, what's the strength of that inner relationship?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how willing am I? And usually we're not willing. And that's like the very first step. Usually we're like, oh, forget this. Like, I just want this gone. And that is like the epitome of like unwillingness to be in relationship, to be an imperfect human that's just feeling their humanity and feeling their disappointment and feeling that wound, right? That having not gotten met. And I know we talk a little bit about the existential angst that's just inherent. Like, in fact, like you can't not have it if you're alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you exist, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing all of that.
I think often people think that if they can just get through, they externalize. So if it's a situation, they make it about the situation or an event, and then thinking if I just want this to be over so I don't feel these things again. And I really have learned to lean into whatever is going on for the moment and knowing that it will last for as long as it lasts. And I just have to trust that. And what I really felt pleased about, I'm going to be very, very vague about this because I want to be respectful. I think being specific would be really helpful for you, the listener. And I'm in this moment today, I'm not going to do that. But I have a friend that I'm close to who tends to give me unsolicited advice. And they did. And I said, how can I kindly let you know when I feel like you've crossed a boundary? And I haven't had conflict with this person. We've been in a relationship for a decent amount of time. And what unfolded from that was I heard a lot of all the things about me that are difficult and challenging, and how this person feels like they have to walk on eggshells, and I have problems with intimacy and I avoid, and a lot of stuff. And I was really able, and I've learned this from you, to listen instead of going into a place of defensiveness, to really listen to what they were saying, and was able to reflect. I hear that you're saying, kind of listed all the things that they said that were challenging in their perspective about me to be around, and that must be really hard. They did bring up something that I was not there for them, and I handled a situation very, very poorly. I may have apologized, but I really never fully acknowledged how harmful my behavior was. And I went in and acknowledged the situation and that I handled it very poorly, and said I still had some more to process, but I just needed some time. And I spent a couple days incredibly dysregulated. Steve and I actually, so in where I live in my state, it's legal to get marijuana and gummies. And so about over a year ago, I went for my first time to the dispensary to get some pretty mild THC. And I told Steve, like, I can't sit in my skin. This is really like, I'm very, very dysregulated. So Friday, we went to the dispensary, got some heavier duty stuff. It did take the edge off. And we talked about this in the last episode, that my OCD and my attachment injuries, it's my trauma and my OCD that get kicked up. And then the ruminating about this situation and all the things that I wanted to say. And it was really hard for probably 2 days. I was really just in this stuff. And I I think I told myself I wasn't going to think about it and it didn't work. And I thought, okay, so I need a day to really think about it. But I also used, I have this inner part that's a loving parent that I didn't have. And I let this part speak to the person that I felt hurt by. And it's what never happened to me as a child. There wasn't an adult who spoke up for me saying, what are you thinking? This is not okay. You can't talk to Patricia this way. And, you said blah, 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 blah. That is not the case. And look at, how loving and kind. And so it's like I had that parent that I never had really standing up for me. And my parts really needed to hear that. And I did a tremendous amount of inner work. I will tell you, though, that the following day when this third thing happened, which I'm not going to talk about, it pushed me over the edge. And up until then, my husband has been just amazing. And because of this, it's been hard for me to eat. It's been hard for me to think of what I want to eat. I did ask him one day if he would make some food for me because I knew I needed some protein. And it just was too much for me to do stuff. We still walk the dogs. I think we went to Fiesta Island one day. I mean, I historically shut down when this happens. I just can't deal. I get so flooded, and I'm slowing down the process now to see that with the OCD and when I don't feel seen and heard, my PDA kicks in, my attachment injuries, it's just a lot. And I normally shut down, and I was not, and I consistently kept telling him, I'm so proud that I'm talking to you, and we're, I'm still walking, and we're doing all of these things and staying present and really having to be there for myself, because you're the person that I reach out to, Jen, when I struggle, and you were gone. And this other person I talked to often, and I was having conflict. And I had this thought of, if I would have known that it was going to devolve to this, I just wouldn't have said anything. And as I shared in, I don't know, previous episode or before that, when I told you how I was feeling and you didn't have the capacity, I went in this place of, see, I shouldn't have said anything. And what I said to this other person was, I see conflict as an opportunity to get closer, as a way to strengthen our relationship. But it didn't feel like that happened. But I went into that narrative of look at all this stuff that happened. But on Saturday, when this third thing happened, and I said to my husband, that's it, I can't deal, I'm shutting down. This is the first time. It's interesting. I've talked to people who, when they lose a pet, they'll say I'm never getting another pet again because the grief is just too much. That does not resonate for me. If one pet dies, I want another one. I love the love. This is the first time that I honestly thought, I don't want to do relationships anymore, because the feelings were so intense. And the hurt and the misunderstanding and just the intensity, I don't think I want to do this anymore.
Yes.
I wouldn't have ended my friendship with you, but if it devolved, I'd just be okay. And with this one that I had conflict with, I really had to think about, do I want this relationship? And if somebody finds it this challenging, based on the words that they said, finds it this challenging to be around me, I don't think it's good for them. It's certainly not good for me. And I sat with it and processed and blah. And then Sunday morning at about 5 a.m, I got up and I just wrote this beautiful letter that I shared with you, Jen. And it basically said, based on the words that you're telling me, do you even want to continue to be in a friendship? I'm still processing, but if you're clear about where you're at, why don't you let me know now so that I can kind of process in a way to finish? And I have some things that belong to this person. And I was already letting go and grieving the relationship and thinking, I'm going to return these things and we're just going to move on. There's an event that's coming up that has to do with this person. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to feel okay showing up to this event. I don't know if you even want me there. And I talked about, friendships can be for a season, and maybe this is just the season of our friendship. And I've really appreciated the time that we've spent together. And I don't know if this was just a knee-jerk reaction or if you've been feeling unhappy for a long time, or a combination of both, but I'm confused. And, I just feel like you did a beautiful job of not getting defensive. But I also said, if we do decide to be friends or continue our friendship, I need to see what works for me, because just as you have a right to show up and be you, I have a right to be in relationships where I'm appreciated and enjoyed. And I'm not so sure about that right now. And I think once I sent that off, I was very dysregulated, had a ton of GI symptoms, nervousness in my stomach. It would go all the way to my chest, and I had to keep bringing in my inner parts and my adult parts to reassure me that like, this is what healthy people do. It's okay to feel upset. And to know that like, I have a choice. I get to choose whether I want to stay or go. And that created some empowerment for me. And I went paddling on Sunday, went with a friend for about 1.5 miles, and then they were done. And I put my boat on the dock and helped them get their boat back. And then I went and paddled by myself for about 4.5 miles, which was just what I needed to get in that cadence of paddling. There's something about it that is so meditative for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I reached out to you and said, hey, when you get back, if you haven't celebrated, I'd love to FaceTime in and celebrate your birthday with you and be part of that, which was a big thing because I'm kind of in this place of everything feels hard. And I thought about reaching out to you on Saturday, but because I was in such a dysregulated place that I knew that if you looked at me the wrong way, that may just push me over the edge. And I didn't know that I would come back to it. I know that's very dramatic and I would not hurt myself, but the feelings were so intense that it's like, I don't think I can count on anybody right now because I am so dysregulated.
Yeah. And I'm imperfect.
Yeah. And I think it's really okay. I had talked to my coach about this because I felt like I wasn't showing up to things. And she's like, maybe you need to make your world small right now. And that's what I do anyways. But I have judgment about that because I think in the neurotypical world, we're told to go out and take a walk and be with people and don't isolate yourself. And I think that when you have trauma, when you are neurodivergent, when you're autistic, when you get overstimulated, when you get dysregulated, you want to get your nervous system regulated. And that means keeping things small, predictable, comforting, because the goal is to get regulated. And if that means that there's a chance that I'm not going to get what I want and get dysregulated, I was in a place that was so heightened that I couldn't afford to get pushed over the edge, just couldn't. And to see that as self-care. And so I did end up, after I sent that letter sometime later in the evening, I did get a message from this person saying that they were really, really sorry that they're going through a lot right now. And that was their knee-jerk reaction. And they do want to be friends. And they would like to have me come to this event. And maybe when it calms down, we can talk about what happened. And so I had some resolution on that. And I'm still kind of in this place of, and trying not to spend a lot of energy on it, of how do I reintegrate into that? And how do I take care of myself? Knowing that if we have different ideas of what intimacy is and what sharing is, it kind of goes back to that thing of making my world small. If I open my soul to somebody and they don't have the capacity to receive the gifts that I have and it feels burdensome, it doesn't serve either one of us to do that. And this may have been a one-off where they were just having a hard time. And so they said a lot of things that maybe, I don't know if they feel them or not. And then trying to decide, is that my responsibility to sort that out, or is that their responsibility? Because I'm fine the way I am and I will own my behavior. But if I don't know about it in the moment, I can't do anything about it. So it's been a lot.
That is a lot. I think that you handled it beautifully. I'm glad. It's funny, the curiosity, right? And the space and the compassion, like your friend came around.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that reintegrating, like you're not sure. And I would actually say like taking care of yourself and then seeing what's there, you know, and I do think that you guys are using two very different lenses to look at the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I think there's a little cartoon, right, that's drawn out where there's, I guess from one vantage point, like, and there's a character on either side that's pointing down at the ground, and one person's seeing a 6 and the other person's seeing a 9. Mm-hmm. Right. And so sometimes I wonder, like talking like not about the content, but about like the frame, right? Like the frame of reference that you're both using. And then the real valuable thing here too is like just validating your feelings and how it affects you and doing your work with the attachment wounds. And also simultaneously, as best you can, knowing that what this person is saying and how they're viewing you is a projection on their part. Judgment stays with the judger, as we say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's less a comment about your friend and more just a broad thing. Yeah. But I think it's important to articulate the lenses that we use. I think it's important to, know what our biases are and to be able to let people know who they're talking to. Right? Mm-hmm. when someone comes to me, like I'm pretty open. I'm like, yeah, a feminist on your hands here. And that is going to be the lens I'm going to be looking through things with so that they can just increase that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mama.
I know it's been a lot. It's been a lot. Yeah. But I have to say, I paddled again last night, and I paddle with this group. I just have this need to paddle fast. I just do. It's what is healing for me. And I talk to them about it, like not if I peel off, but when I peel off, because it's a very small group. And there is something about being in this cadence, the cadence of just my paddles hitting the water and gliding across the water, that is so meditative for me. And then I love the feeling of coming back just feeling exhausted, just spent.
I'm excited you went yourself. That's not something you do very often, or if at all, really.
I started paddling with someone, and then I paddled on my own for quite some time. And then I found these paddling groups and pretty much only paddled in the groups. And Sunday is the first time that I've done a good, decent paddle by myself. And I really think once a week I want to take myself out and take a paddle by myself, because there is something that is just, I'm really turning inwards. And it's interesting, the other thing, yesterday, my son Daniel, he's so sweet. He was at school and he sent me a picture of his lunch, and I'm like, yum, bite, please. And he said, what do you want to have for lunch? And I had gotten up to fix myself lunch, and he was going to order me Uber Eats if I would have told him what I wanted. And we've talked about this before, that I have this thing about like, Uber Eats is just indulgent for me. I don't have any judgment on anybody else doing it. It's not like I can't afford it. And as we were talking, I said, you know what? The next time that Steve has gone golfing or he goes to a concert, I'm going to order Uber Eats for myself. And Daniel was so sweet. He's like, once a month, I should just Uber Eats you stuff. He's, this kid is in college. He's working on the weekends as a server. He doesn't have a lot of money. And the fact that he's just so kind and thoughtful and generous really touched my heart. So I asked Steve when he got home, and he's golfing next Tuesday. And so I texted Daniel and said, okay, I'm committing to order Uber Eats, to DoorDash or Uber Eats some food for myself on Tuesday. And I've never done it. So part of it is just learning the technicalities of like, how do I do it? But I really have been, especially after this really hard 4 days, of what are the ways that I withhold from myself and do not allow myself to really nurture myself and have what I want. And this morning we went to Trader Joe's, and there are just some treats that I'm wanting. And I normally don't keep treats in the house, but I'm wanting treats. And why am I going to withhold that from myself? And I think sometimes when we get pushed to our limit, it forces us to be in this position. COVID did a lot of this for me, that like, if it brings me joy, I don't care, that having joy is really important. And I think that when we get pushed to our emotional limits, our physical limits, whatever it is, that we can come through it and go like, I want to be kinder to myself. I want to be gentler with myself. I want to treat myself, because I tend to withhold. If you're someone who overindulges, then maybe caring for yourself may look like pulling back, but we all have what caring for ourselves looks like. It's different.
Yes. Yeah. I do find that it maps onto some of those early patterns too.
Say a little bit more about that.
I'm sometimes really curious about, my own attentiveness to myself and my needs, and especially with like super basic stuff. Yeah. Right. Like there have been times where it's like, I really need to put myself to bed and tuck myself in like I'm 3.
Yeah.
Right. Or feed myself in a certain way, that when I catch myself not doing those things, not paying attention to my own basic needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was a latchkey kid. So eating cold food, eating, something out of a can, not sitting down when I eat. There's nothing wrong with any of those things if you do them. But for me, taking time for myself to really treat myself and not treat myself like the child that, had to come home and get a snack. And there's no judgment on if you are a single parent and this is your child, if this is you, like there's no judgment. I'm just sharing my experience. But for me to really treat myself in a way that shows that I love and care about myself and I'm tending to myself is something that I need to do more of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
Oh, I don't think so, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for being here. It's so funny because I hadn't resolved. It wasn't until I met with my coach on Monday that as an autistic, I didn't learn about friendships. And how I learned about friendships was a very enmeshed, I had to overperform, That's how I got my value. And so I have shame around every time I have another realization of that, like I'm doing a reenactment with you. I go into shame, like when I'm with my coach. And so on, I think Wednesday, when this thing happened that I never really told you about, it felt pretty big. And then when the thing happened with this other person and seeing how you and I can talk about stuff, like my thing with you, like all of a sudden it's like, whoop, drop down to like, oh, this is nothing. I know we can work through it. And because you and I welcome conflict and disagreement with curiosity and love and knowing that it deepens the relationship even when it's hard, it just really put such a different twist on it for me and really made me appreciate even more just the work that we're able to do together. I don't think a lot of people can do the work that we do.
It has not been my experience. Just leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just really appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Hey again. So I'm curious to know how that is for you. Do y'all have as many attachment wounds as I seem to struggle with? I think it's pretty common. I think if you're neurodivergent, you've got trauma. And so many of us were not understood and not wired the way that our caregivers were, or caregivers were undiagnosed autistic or neurodivergent, didn't get the skills. So I just think there's so much of this that goes on for people. I don't think it's unique to me at all. But I hope you found it helpful. If you're interested in working with Jen, you can reach out to her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. If you'd like to work with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I have a contact form on my website that helps me get the information I need if you want to work together. If you want to send an email to me, you have feedback about the podcast. I always love hearing that. That's unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to speak your mind. You have a right to own your reality. It's okay to get upset. It's okay to get dysregulated. I don't choose it, but if it happens, it's okay. It's okay to make your world small. It's okay to shut down if you need to. It's okay to push through. It's okay to ask for support. It's okay if people don't see you and get who you are. It's okay for you to speak your truth. It's okay to have conflict and for people to not get who you are and for you to be really clear about who you are. It's okay to ruminate. It's not fun. I always say that if you're suffering, please reach out to someone. Call a crisis line, call a therapist, call somebody if you are suffering, because I don't want anybody to suffer and I don't want to normalize that being in a hard place is okay. And you'll have to decide where that line is. If this is just hard and you're working through stuff and when it crosses over to this is not okay. You have a right to have joy and peace and balance and serenity and nurturing and things that make you feel cozy and comfortable. Activities that put you in the flow that are relaxing and nurturing. And if you're not experiencing that or experience that in small amounts, that's okay too. What is it that might bring you some joy and comfort? Do you just need more rest? Are you an autistic burnout? I just want y'all to take care of yourself and know that however you're showing up today and whoever you are and whatever's going on, that you're okay, you're beautiful, you're precious, you're loved. There's nothing wrong with you. You just might not have the right people in your life that appreciate who you are. I think that's it. Have a blessed day.